What if I told you the narcissist in your life wasn't a coincidence, but a message? I know how that sounds. You're probably thinking, why me? Why did I have to go through that pain, that confusion, that emotional hell? But here's the truth. You didn't just end up in that relationship by accident. You were placed there, not as punishment, but as a wake-up call. Not because you're broken, but because something inside of you was ready to rise. This video isn't about blame. It's about clarity. It's about helping you see what that relationship was really trying to show you about your patterns, your conditioning, and your power. Because once you understand why it happened, once you see the blueprint behind the chaos, it changes everything. You stop feeling ashamed. You stop internalizing the abuse. And most importantly, you stop repeating the cycle. If you've ever been in a relationship where you were walking on eggshells, if you've ever silenced yourself just to keep the peace, if you've ever asked, why do I keep attracting people who drain me? You're not alone. And you're not crazy. You're just waking up. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will not only shift your perspective, it might just set you free. Let's begin. The Trap of Unhealed Wounds. You didn't end up with a narcissist because you're broken. You ended up there because no one ever taught you what love isn't. That's what makes this kind of pain so confusing. It doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in quietly. It shows up as charm, as chemistry, as finally someone who sees me. But what they saw wasn't your wholeness, it was your wound. Let's be honest, most of us weren't taught to recognize manipulation. We were taught to accommodate it, to call it loyalty, to call it just the way things are. If you grew up learning to keep the peace, to earn affection by being easy, agreeable, and selfless, then you became the perfect target. Because narcissists don't look for people who are weak. They look for people who are wired to overfunction. People who confuse giving with connection. People who think love has to hurt just a little to be real. I knew a man named Paul, quiet, dependable, mid-40s, owned a small business. He had spent most of his life trying to be everything for everyone. Never complained, never pushed back. When he got into a relationship with someone who constantly shifted blame, gave him the silent treatment, and made him feel like nothing he did was good enough, he didn't leave. He worked harder. Why? Because somewhere along the line, he internalized the belief that if you're not being loved, it's because you're not doing enough. That belief didn't come from her. It came from childhood. She just activated it. That's what narcissists do. They don't create your pain. They expose it. They shine a light on the parts of you that are still trying to earn love, still trying to prove worth, still trying to heal an old story by playing it out with new characters. And until you recognize that, the cycle will repeat. This is exactly where the Stoics bring clarity. Epictetus taught that we are not disturbed by events themselves, but by our interpretation of them. The narcissist's behavior is cruel, yes, but the deeper suffering comes from the meaning we assign to it. They treated me like this, so I must not be enough. That thought is the real wound, and that's the one you have to challenge if you want to heal. It's hard to see clearly when you're still in it. Narcissistic dynamics are designed to confuse. They keep you locked in self-doubt. One day you're the hero, the next you're the villain. You start to question your own memory, your own instincts. And all of this has one goal: to make you disconnect from your own truth. Once that happens, they've won. Because now you'll do anything to get back that early validation, the "you're amazing" phase that hooked you in the first place. But that validation wasn't real. It was a sales pitch, and the price was your peace. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." When you start to see that the narcissist wasn't the source of your wound, but the trigger, everything changes. You stop chasing answers from them and start asking deeper questions. Why did I stay? Why did I justify what hurt me? Why did I give so much and expect so little? This is where urgency comes in, because if you don't interrupt this pattern, it will repeat. The names will change. The pain won't. And that's the truth no one likes to say out loud. The narcissist wasn't an accident. They were the alarm bell, the turning point, the thing that made your old story unbearable. They cracked the illusion wide open, and that's your moment. So here's your next step. Stop asking why they did what they did. Start asking why you accepted it. That's not blame, that's power. Because once you understand where the wound lives, you can stop handing it over to people who will only use it against you. You can start protecting it, healing it. Rebuilding your self-worth from something earned into something known. The wound is not your fault, but healing it, that's your responsibility. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone access to the parts of you that are still healing. What you owe is to yourself, to protect your peace like it's sacred. The narcissist as a mirror and catalyst. You're not crazy for falling for them. You're not weak for staying too long. And you're definitely not stupid for thinking it was love. That's how the narcissist works. They don't just deceive you, they reflect you. And that's the part nobody warns you about. This wasn't just a relationship gone wrong. This was a mirror being held up to your deepest, most unhealed parts. The narcissist didn't just break your heart, they exposed your blueprint. And if you're willing to look at what they showed you, everything can change. Because here's the truth. Narcissists don't come into your life to destroy you. They come to reveal you, not intentionally, not consciously. But through their chaos, they shine a spotlight on the parts of you that still need healing. The people-pleasing, the fear of abandonment, the belief that your value comes from how much you give. You may have thought you were choosing them, but what you were really choosing was a familiar pattern, one you've been stuck in for years. I worked with a man named Eli, 50, divorced twice, successful by all external measures. But when it came to relationships, he kept ending up with emotionally manipulative women. The kind who made him feel amazing one minute and invisible the next. Every time he thought he could fix it. Every time he blamed himself when it failed. Eventually he broke down and asked, "Why do I keep choosing people who make me feel small?" The answer wasn't about them. It was about his wiring. He had learned early on that love meant walking on eggshells. So when someone gave him just enough attention to feel needed, he mistook it for connection. This is the mirror. And this is the trap. And this is where stoicism brings clarity. Marcus Aurelius faced betrayal at the highest level, by trusted allies, by political opponents, even by his own son. But instead of reacting with bitterness or blame, he reflected inward. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. He understood that obstacles don't block the path. They are the path. The narcissist? They are the obstacle, but also the opportunity. The moment you stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "What did this reveal in me?" That's when you shift from victim to philosopher. That's when the healing begins. Because until you recognize what the narcissist mirrored in you, you will repeat the pattern. The face will change. The chaos won't. And here's the urgency. If you don't see this dynamic for what it really was, you'll keep looking for closure in the wrong places. You'll keep hoping they'll apologize. You'll keep replaying old conversations, trying to make sense of nonsense, but they were never the point. You were the entire experience was designed to bring you back to yourself. Epictetus taught that suffering doesn't come from events, it comes from our interpretation of those events. The narcissist's manipulation is real. The pain is real. But the meaning you assign to it, that's what determines your future. Are you going to see it as proof that you're unlovable, or as a wake-up call that it's time to stop tolerating crumbs and start demanding truth? Here's the action. Stop focusing on them. They were just the trigger, and Focus on the wound they revealed. Where did you learn to abandon yourself? Where did you learn to shrink to feel safe? Where did you get the idea that love should hurt? Because once you answer those questions, once you stare into that mirror without flinching, you'll start to break the cycle. You'll stop handing your worth to people who are only interested in control. You'll stop explaining your pain to people committed to misunderstanding it, and you'll start rebuilding a version of yourself that doesn't tolerate emotional chaos just to feel seen. This is the work. This is the way forward. And yes, it's hard, but it's also where everything begins to change. The breaking of the cycle. There comes a moment, quiet but undeniable, when you can't do it anymore. You can't keep explaining yourself to someone who isn't listening. You can't keep shrinking to make them feel big. You can't keep performing for a kind of love that leaves you empty. That moment isn't a breakdown. It's the beginning of the breakthrough. It's the start of breaking the cycle. The cycle always looks the same. A rush of attention, a slow erosion of boundaries. Then confusion, silence, blame. You twist yourself trying to be enough, not realizing that being enough was never the point. They just needed you off balance. Because off-balance people are easier to control. And the scariest part? The dysfunction felt familiar. You didn't see red flags, you saw normal. You didn't call it abuse, you called it love. Because your nervous system was trained to find chaos comforting. And that's the real danger. When emotional pain feels like home, healing feels like loss. But here's the Stoic shift. Familiarity isn't truth. Just because it feels comfortable doesn't mean it's good. Seneca wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." When your attention is constantly external, on their moods, their needs, their validation, you lose your own center. You become everywhere but inside yourself. Breaking the cycle starts when you come home. I once worked with a man named Aaron. Grew up in a household where emotions were either ignored or punished. In adulthood, he attracted partners who mirrored that dynamic. Hot and cold, affectionate and cruel. He stayed because it felt like what he'd always known. He didn't question the pattern until his teenage daughter pulled him aside and said, "Dad, you're not happy anymore." Sure. That's what broke him. Not the relationship, but the realization that he was modeling pain as love. That's how cycles get passed down, silently through repetition. But they also stop with one decision, not with me, not anymore. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's the Stoic directive. When you know the pattern, when you've seen the damage, when you've tasted the cost, you act not out of revenge, not out of ego, but out of principle. And here's the hard truth. Breaking the cycle will cost you. You'll lose people who were only attached to the version of you that tolerated dysfunction. You'll grieve the fantasy of who you thought they were. You'll face moments of loneliness that tempt you to go back. But you won't, because you'll realize something more painful than letting go. Staying would mean losing yourself again. This is your turning point. The chaos was never love. The emotional roller coaster was never intimacy. The performance wasn't connection, it was survival. And you're done surviving. Now you build something better. The Stoics didn't just preach endurance, they taught discernment. You don't stay in the fire longer than you need to. You use the flame to forge a stronger self. Then you step out. So here's your call to action. Stop romanticizing red flags. Stop explaining away emotional neglect. Stop waiting for someone to change while you keep breaking to accommodate them. Draw the line. Break the pattern. Not just for you, but for everyone who comes after you. Because when you stop tolerating pain disguised as love, you stop the cycle dead in its tracks. And that's what makes you dangerous in the best way possible. Not because you fight harder, but because you no longer play the game. Redefining love and rebuilding. When the chaos finally stops, the silence can be deafening. You're no longer dodging insults, second-guessing your worth, or trying to read someone's mood like it's a survival manual. And yet you don't feel free. Not yet. Because now you're left with the wreckage. The real work begins not when the narcissist leaves, but when you realize how much of yourself you gave away trying to keep them. This is the rebuilding. This is where it gets real. Most people think healing is about moving on. It's not. Healing is about reclaiming the parts of you that were silenced, the intuition you ignored, the standards you lowered, the truth you buried just to feel wanted. You're not starting over. You're coming back to the version of you that existed before you were trained to tolerate less. Here's the trap. After abuse, your definition of love is warped. You start associating anxiety with passion, intensity with connection, emotional chaos with meaning. So when calm, steady, respectful love shows up, it feels boring, foreign, like something's missing. But what's missing isn't chemistry, it's dysfunction. And that's the shift. You have to retrain yourself to see peace as valuable. Predictability is safe. Respect is attractive. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." Your nervous system may crave the highs and lows, but your soul is begging for freedom. Not just freedom from someone else's control, but freedom from your old patterns. I remember working with a man named Drew, stoic by nature, quiet, thoughtful. After 2 back-to-back toxic relationships, he told me he didn't know what healthy love felt like anymore. He said, "When someone's kind to me now, I assume they're faking it." Larry, that's what happens when you've been gaslit for years. Your radar gets broken. You don't trust your own judgment. But slowly, piece by piece, he rebuilt. He learned to pause when he felt the urge to over-explain. He stopped chasing. He started speaking up, not to provoke, but to protect. That's when everything started to change. Not just his relationships, his identity. This is the Stoic practice in motion. Not detachment for the sake of ego, but clarity in the name of virtue. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Let your one delight and refreshment be to pass from one service to the community to another, with God ever in mind." In modern terms, serve the truth, serve your growth. Serve the next version of yourself by choosing what actually serves your peace. So what does rebuilding look like? It looks like setting boundaries without guilt. It looks like trusting your instincts the first time. It looks like refusing to chase, perform, or explain your worth. It looks like raising your standards and letting people disqualify themselves. You'll know you've turned the corner when chaos doesn't excite you anymore. When silence isn't something you fear, but something you protect. When you stop mistaking manipulation for connection, when you stop asking, "Why don't they love me?" and start asking, "Why did I ever think I had to earn love in the first place?" Because the truth is, real love doesn't demand you shrink. It doesn't punish you for speaking. It doesn't play games with your mind, your time, or your soul. Real love, healthy love, holds space for your full self. No performance required. This is your rebuild, brick by brick, choice by choice, boundary by boundary. And yes, it's uncomfortable. You'll miss the familiar pain before you fully accept the unfamiliar peace. But keep going, because on the other side of this work is a version of you that doesn't settle, a version of you that doesn't abandon himself just to feel chosen, a version of you that is no longer defined by what hurt him, but by how he rose. You are the revolution. If you've made it this far, you already know. This wasn't just about them. It was never just about the narcissist. It was about the pattern, the wiring, the version of you that was taught to survive instead of thrive. And now that version is done. What's rising in its place is something far more powerful. You. But let's be honest, becoming this version of you costs everything that was built on self-abandonment. The relationships that only worked because you stayed silent. The identities that only held together because you kept performing. The routines that kept you busy so you wouldn't have to feel. When you wake up, really wake up, you don't just change your choices. You change your entire blueprint. And that right there is revolutionary. Most people never do it. They stay in cycles because it's easier to be familiar than it is to be free. But you were placed in that pain for a reason, not to break, but to break the cycle. Marcus Aurelius knew this kind of pain. He ruled an empire while grieving the deaths of his children, managing betrayal and battling illness. And still, in his darkest hours, he wrote one of the most important truths in Stoic thought. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. But he didn't say the world would get easier. He said you would get stronger. That's what you've done. Now you're not just healing, you're rewriting the future. Every time you choose peace over chaos, boundaries over guilt, truth over comfort, you're doing what the generations before you couldn't. You're becoming the one who ends it. I knew a man named Victor, grew up with a violent father, married a woman who weaponized silence and shame. For decades, he lived in fear of being too much, so he stayed small. He endured weighing, but one day after therapy, after countless nights questioning his sanity, he stood in front of his son and said, I will never let you think this is what love looks like. That was it. He left. He rebuilt. He didn't just heal himself. He changed the story for everyone who comes after him. That's not just recovery. That's revolution. And now it's your turn. You're not here to be the peacekeeper. You're not here to be someone else's emotional sponge. You're not here to stay silent just to make the room comfortable. You are here to end the story that says love requires pain, to reject the script that says men have to suffer quietly, to show others, your kids, your friends, your future self, that healing is possible and boundaries are sacred. Epictetus once said, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. That's your path now. Not perfection, but presence. Not theory, but action. You don't need to talk about who you've become. People will feel it in your energy, your standards, your peace. Because here's the final truth. You were never broken. You were conditioned. You were never too sensitive. You were unprotected. And you were never unlovable. You were just giving your love to people who hadn't earned it. Now, you know better. And once you know, you don't go back. This is where it ends. This is where it begins. You are the one who breaks the cycle. You are the one who redefines what love feels like. You are the one who remembers who he is and never forgets again. And that's the most stoic thing you could ever do. Absolutely. Here's the finalized outro with the like and subscribe call to action naturally woven into the tone and message. Without breaking the emotional flow, it keeps the Stoic Lens 360 voice intact, serious, grounded, and purposeful. You didn't just survive the narcissist, you survived yourself. The version of you that didn't know his worth. The version that confused love with sacrifice, attention with value, and chaos with connection. That man, the one who tolerated the emotional gymnastics, who second-guessed his gut, who kept showing up for people who kept disappearing, he's not here anymore. What's left is someone who sees clearly, someone who knows that real love doesn't make you question your reality, that respect isn't earned through suffering, and that peace, real peace, is not boring. It's powerful. You don't need to chase anymore. You don't need to fix. You don't need to prove, because now you remember who you are, and yes, it hurts. It hurts to grieve the time you lost, the illusions you believed, and the people you thought would change. But what hurts more is staying stuck in cycles that cost you your soul. And that ends now. Because when a man breaks the pattern, he doesn't just heal himself, he changes everything. For his future, for his family, for his legacy. So here's what you do next. Protect your peace like it's your most valuable possession, because it is. Speak your truth even if your voice shakes. Stop explaining your worth to people who benefit from your silence. And when that old version of you tries to creep back in, the one who tolerated, who overgave, who stayed too long, remind him that his job is done. You've got it from here. If this message spoke to something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs it. And if you want more content like this, grounded, honest, and built to help you stay strong, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. We're not here for surface-level advice. We're here to heal, to grow, and to lead with wisdom.